In the shadowed heart of Blackthorn Manor, a library hides a deadly secret. Whispers echo through its ancient stacks, footsteps vanish into thin air, and a forbidden book, the Codex Nocturnus, holds the power to unleash darkness. Why did librarian Gideon Blackthorn vanish 40 years ago? Who is the cloaked stranger stalking Miss Jane Marple, as she unravels a trail of blood, betrayal, and cryptic clues? Can she stop a sinister ritual before it claims another soul? Join Miss Marple in a chilling mystery where every page turns toward danger, and the truth is more terrifying than any ghost. Music fades to a haunting note, a soft thud like a book falling. Chapter 1. The whisper in the stacks. The train rattled through the mist-shrouded countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the restless thoughts of Miss Jane Marple. She sat by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly, a skein of soft blue wool unraveling in her lap. The English landscape, draped in the sombre greys of late autumn, blurred past hedgerows heavy with dew, fields fading into fog. Blackthorn Village awaited her, a place she'd never visited but felt oddly familiar, thanks to the vivid letters from her old friend, Lady Beatrice Harrow. Beatrice's most recent missive, tucked in Miss Marple's handbag, was not the usual cheerful recounting of village fetes or garden parties. It spoke of unease, of whispers among the villagers about Blackthorn Manor's ancient library, a place of towering shelves and shadowed corners, rumoured to harbour something sinister. Strange noises, Beatrice had written, like footsteps without a source, and a chilling sense of being watched. The villagers called it a ghost, but Beatrice, practical despite her title, suspected otherwise. "You've a knack for seeing what others miss, Jane," the letter had urged. "Come, please. I trust no one else to unravel this." Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles, her sharp eyes catching the first glimpse of Blackthorn's church spire, piercing the fog. She was not one for ghost stories, her mind, honed by years of observing human nature in St. Mary Mead, leaned toward the tangible, motives, secrets, the quiet betrayals hidden in polite smiles. Yet the mystery intrigued her. A library, after all, was a repository of secrets, not just in its books, but in the hands that turned its pages. The train slowed, hissing to a stop at Blackthorn's modest station. Miss Marple gathered her shawl and handbag, stepping onto the platform where the air smelled of damp leaves and coal smoke. A young man in a tweed cap, likely no older than 20, approached her. "Miss Marple, I'm Tom, Lady Beatrice's driver. Sent to fetch you, ma'am." "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice warm but probing, already noting the lad's nervous fidgeting. "Is all well at the manor?" Tom hesitated, adjusting his cap. "Well enough, ma'am. Just folks talk, you know. About the library. Say it's haunted." He glanced away, as if embarrassed by his own words. Miss Marple smiled faintly. "People do love a good tale. Shall we?" The drive to Blackthorn Manor wound through narrow lanes, past stone cottages with glowing windows. Tom spoke little, but Miss Marple coaxed out snippets. The library's noises had grown louder in recent weeks, scaring off the maids. A groundskeeper swore he'd seen a figure vanish into the stacks at dusk. She filed each detail away, her mind already weaving a tapestry of possibilities. Blackthorn Manor loomed ahead, its ivy-clad facade both grand and foreboding under the overcast sky. Its tall windows glinted like watchful eyes, and the sprawling gardens, though meticulously kept, seemed to hold their breath. Lady Beatrice waited at the entrance, her silver hair pinned neatly, her expression a mix of relief and strain. "Jane, you're a godsend," Beatrice said, embracing her friend. Her voice, usually commanding, carried a tremor. "I feel foolish, dragging you here for noises, but it's more than that. The staff are jittery, and the village won't stop gossiping." "Nonsense." "Beatrice," Miss Marple replied, patting her arm. "A mystery is never foolish. Now, tell me everything." Over tea in the drawing room, Beatrice recounted the library's history. Built in the 17th century, it housed rare manuscripts collected by the Blackthorne family, whose wealth stemmed from trade and, some whispered, less savoury ventures. The noises, soft thuds, rustling pages, an occasional low moan had started months ago, always at night. The library, vast and labyrinthian, was rarely used now, save by scholars or curious guests. Beatrice had locked it after a maid fled, claiming she'd felt icy fingers brush her neck. Miss Marple listened, her needles clicking steadily. "And you've heard these sounds yourself?" Beatrice nodded. "Last week, I went in after midnight. I thought I heard whispering, Jane. Not words, but a sound, like breath against paper. I searched, but found nothing." "Curious," Miss Marple murmured. "I'd like to see this library, if I may." The library was a cavern of oak and leather, its shelves soaring to a vaulted ceiling painted with faded cherubs. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through stained glass windows, each depicting scenes of scholarly pursuit. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and wax polish. Miss Marple's footsteps echoed on the polished floor as she moved between the stacks, her eyes scanning for anything amiss. Beatrice trailed behind, wringing her hands. "It's beautiful, isn't it? But it feels wrong now." Miss Marple nodded absently, her attention caught by a row of shelves near the back, where the shadows seemed denser. She ran her fingers along the spines folios of Latin poetry, treatises on alchemy, a battered copy of Malleus Maleficarum. Her hand paused at a gap where a book was missing, the space marked by a faint outline in the dust. "Beatrice, do you know what was kept here?" she asked, pointing. Beatrice frowned. "I'm not sure. The catalogue is outdated. My great-uncle was the last to maintain it properly." Miss Marple knelt, inspecting the shelf's edge. Her fingers brushed a seam in the wood, almost invisible. She pressed gently, and with a soft click, a panel swung inward, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside lay a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and brittle. Beatrice gasped. "What in heaven's name?" Miss Marple unfolded the note with care. The ink was faded, but the words were clear. "The forbidden collection must remain sealed. Its knowledge is a curse, its power a peril. Guard it, or all is lost." No signature, no date, but the handwriting was elegant, urgent. "A curse," Beatrice whispered, her face pale. "Jane, what does this mean?" "It means," Miss Marple said, folding the note carefully, "that someone, long ago, hid something in this library, and someone else, perhaps, is looking for it." The afternoon waned. As Miss Marple explored further, her mind alight with questions. She noted the library's layout: 3 levels of stacks, a spiral staircase to a balcony, and a reading alcove with a locked cabinet. She tapped the cabinet, finding it solid, but her attention returned to the hidden panel. Why conceal a single note? Was it a warning or a lure? Dinner was a quiet affair, the manor staff moving with hushed efficiency. The butler, Mr. Grayson, a stooped man with sharp eyes, served the soup with a deference that bordered on wariness. Miss Marple observed him, noting how his gaze flicked toward the library door. The maid, Clara, a nervous girl of 18, nearly dropped a tray when Beatrice mentioned the library. "Clara, have you heard the noises?" Miss Marple asked gently. Clara's eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am, like someone's turning pages, but no one's there. I won't go in after dark." "Not for anything." Miss Marple smiled reassuringly. "Quite sensible. Tell me, have you seen anyone lingering near the library?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Mr. Grayson, Mum. He was there late last night, holding a candle. Said he was checking the locks, but he looked frightened." Beatrice frowned. "Grayson, he's been with us for years." "People can surprise us," Miss Marple said mildly, but her mind was racing. A butler with access to every room, a hidden note, a missing book pieces of a puzzle, yet to a line. That night, Miss Marple sat by her bedroom window, the manor silent save for the distant creak of settling wood. She reread the note, its words, looping in her mind: forbidden collection, curse, peril. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where gossip often hid truth in plain sight. Blackthorn was no different. Someone knew more than they let on. Unable to sleep, she slipped on her dressing gown and took a small flashlight from her bag. The manor's corridors were dark, the air chilly. She moved silently, her soft slippers muffling her steps, until she reached the library door. It was locked, as Beatrice had said, but Miss Marple had borrowed a spare key from the housekeeper, claiming she'd misplaced her spectacles. Inside, the library was a realm of shadows, the stained glass windows now black against the night. Her flashlight beam danced across the shelves, illuminating titles in gold leaf. She returned to the hidden panel, checking for further clues, but found only dust. As she stood, a faint sound stopped her rustle, like paper sliding across a table. She froze, her heart steady but her senses sharp. The sound came again, from the balcony above. She moved to the spiral staircase, her flashlight sweeping the darkness. The rustling stopped, replaced by a low, breathy sound, almost like a sigh. Not words, as Beatrice had said, but a whisper against the silence. "Show yourself." Miss Marple called softly, her voice calm but firm. Silence answered. She climbed the staircase, her beam catching the glint of a brass railing. On the balcony, a single book lay open on a reading table, its pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze, yet no windows were open. She approached, her fingers brushing the book's cover. Ars Arcana, a 16th century text on forbidden rituals. The open page bore a woodcut of a cloaked figure, its eyes hollow. A chill ran through her, not from fear but from certainty. Someone had been here moments ago. She scanned the balcony, finding a smudge of wax on the floor, a candle, recently extinguished. Grayson, perhaps, or another. She closed the book, tucking it under her arm. The library felt alive, its shadows shifting as if reluctant to reveal their secrets. Miss Marple descended the stairs, her mind alight with resolve. The note, the book, the whispers, they were threads in a web, and she would follow them, back. In her room, she locked the door and placed Ars Arcana on her bedside table. The note she hid in her knitting bag, safe from prying eyes. Tomorrow, she would question Grayson, probe the staff, and search for the missing book from the shelf. The library held answers, and Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, would find them. As she drifted to sleep, the manor silence was broken by a faint rustle, like pages turning in the dark. She smiled faintly. Blackthorn's mystery was just beginning, and she was ready to unravel it, one careful stitch at a time. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The morning sun struggled through Blackthorn Manor's heavy drapes, casting a feeble glow across the breakfast room where Miss Jane Marple sat, her tea cooling untouched. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the night. Events, the rustling pages, the open book, the smudge of candle wax, the cryptic note from the hidden panel, now tucked safely in her knitting bag, weighed on her thoughts. The forbidden collection must remain sealed. What was this collection? And why was it so perilous? She needed more than whispers and shadows to unravel the truth. Lady Beatrice joined her, looking drawn but determined. "Did you sleep, Jane? I heard you moving about last night." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. "A restless mind, Beatrice. I visited the library, found something curious on open book, left as if someone meant for it to be seen, and wax on the floor, fresh from a candle." Beatrice's cup clattered against its saucer. "You went alone, Jane. That's reckless, even for you." "Nonsense," Miss Marple replied, buttering a scone with deliberate calm. "Whoever's behind this expects fear to keep us out. I intend to disappoint them." Her plan for the day was clear: speak with the staff, starting with Mr. Grayson, the butler Clara had seen lurking near the library. But first, she wanted to understand the manor's history, particularly its connection to the library's rumoured ghost. Beatrice suggested they start with the groundskeeper, old Tom, who had worked at Blackthorn for decades and knew its stories better than anyone. They found Tom in the rose garden, pruning thorny branches with a pair of weathered shears. He was a wiry man in his 60s, his face creased like the bark of the oaks lining the manor's drive. His eyes, a faded blue, flickered with caution as Miss Marple approached. "Good morning, Tom," she said, her voice warm but probing. "Beatrice tells me you've seen odd things in the library. Lights, perhaps." Tom's shears paused mid-snip. "Aye, ma'am. Flickering lights, like a candle moving through the stacks. Seen 'em at dusk, mostly when I'm locking up. The grounds, not my place to go poking in, but it ain't natural." Miss Marple nodded, encouraging him to continue. "And these lights always in the same part of the library, near the back, by the tall shelves," Tom said, pointing vaguely toward the manor, where the old books are kept. "Folks say it's Mr. Gideon's ghost, still guarding his treasures." "Gideon?" Miss Marple's interest sharpened. "Tell me about him." Tom leaned on his shears, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "Gideon Blackthorn, the last proper librarian here, disappeared nigh on 40 years ago. Mad for books, he was rare ones, strange ones. Some say he found something in the library he shouldn't have. Never seen again after one stormy night. Left his coat and keys behind, like he vanished into thin air." Beatrice shivered. "I was a child then, but I remember the fuss. My father searched for weeks. Nothing, Miss." Marple's mind ticked over the details. A missing librarian, a hidden note, and now lights in the stacks. "Tom, did Gideon have any visitors before he vanished? Scholars, perhaps, or strangers?" Tom scratched his chin. "Can't rightly say, ma'am, but there was talk of a gentleman, some professor type, who came often. Didn't like him, folks said. Too nosy, always a skin about the library's oldest books." "Thank you, Tom," Miss Marple said, her smile masking the gears turning in her head. A professor, a missing man, a forbidden collection, pieces of a puzzle, still scattered but taking shape. Back in the manor, Miss Marple requested to see any records of Gideon Blackthorne. Beatrice led her to a small study off the main hall, where a cabinet held dusty ledgers and family papers. As Beatrice searched for Gideon's files, Miss Marple's eyes caught a framed photograph on the wall, a group of men in 19th century attire, standing before the library's entrance. One figure, tall and gaunt with piercing eyes, stood out. A brass plaque read, "Blackthorne Manor Staff, 1885. Is this Gideon?" Miss Marple asked, pointing to the gaunt man. Beatrice squinted. "I believe so. My great-uncle spoke of him. Said he was brilliant, but haunted, somehow." Miss Marple studied the photograph, her fingers tracing the frame. Those eyes sharp, almost feverish, felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. She made a mental note to check the village archives for more on Gideon, if he'd been guarding a forbidden collection. His disappearance was no mere accident. The morning passed with Miss Marple interviewing the staff, each encounter revealing a new thread. The cook, Mrs. Hargreaves, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, claimed she'd heard a low hum from the library while fetching water late at night. "Like bees, ma'am," she said, "but wrong, somehow. Made my skin crawl." The housekeeper, Miss Finch, admitted to avoiding the library altogether, citing a bad feeling that grew stronger after dusk. Mr. Grayson, however, proved elusive. When Miss Marple finally cornered him in the pantry, polishing silver with meticulous care, he was polite but guarded. His thin face, framed by greying hair, betrayed no emotion, but his hands tightened around a candlestick when she mentioned the library. "Clara said she saw you there last night." "Mr. Grayson," Miss Marple said, her tone conversational. "Checking the locks, I believe." Grayson's eyes flicked up, then down. "Yes, ma'am. Lady Beatrice asked me to ensure the library was secure. It's my duty, of course," Miss Marple said, her smile disarming. "And you used a candle, not a flashlight. Rather old-fashioned, don't you think?" He stiffened. "The power's unreliable at night, ma'am. Candles are trusty." She nodded, letting the matter drop, but her suspicions deepened. Grayson's explanation was plausible, yet his unease was palpable. Had he left Ars Arcana open on the balcony, or was someone else playing a game? After lunch, Miss Marple returned to the library, armed with a notebook and her flashlight. Beatrice had given her free rein, and she intended to use it. The library felt different in daylight, less oppressive, but no less secretive. She retraced her steps to the balcony, where Ars Arcana had lain open. The book was gone. Someone had returned it to the shelves, or taken it entirely. She examined the wax smudge on the floor, now barely visible. Kneeling, she noticed a faint scratch on the wood, as if something heavy had been dragged. Following the mark, she reached a tall window overlooking the gardens. The latch was loose, the frame slightly ajar. Outside, the grass was trampled, leading toward a copse of yews. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Someone had been here, perhaps entering or exiting through the window. She made a note to ask Tom if he'd seen footprints in the garden, but her attention shifted to a sudden movement below, a shadow, fleeting and human-shaped, darting across the lawn toward the manor's rear entrance. She hurried downstairs, her steps light but swift, and reached the back door just as it clicked shut. The corridor was empty, save for a faint scent of tobacco and damp wool. Whoever it was had vanished into the manor's maze of rooms. Miss Marple stood still, her mind racing. The shadow wasn't Grayson. He'd been in the pantry minutes ago. Another player, then, watching her as closely as she watched them, returning. To the drawing room, she found Beatrice poring over a ledger. "Jane, I found something," Beatrice said, her voice tense. "Gideon's last entry in the library catalogue, dated the night he vanished. It mentions a book, the Codex Nocturnus. He wrote, 'Secured, but at great cost.' Nothing else." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The Codex Nocturnus. The name carried weight, like a stone dropped into still water. Was this the heart of the forbidden collection? And why had Gideon paid a great cost to secure it? The day waned, and as evening settled over Blackthorn Manor, Miss Marple sat by the fire, her knitting idle. The shadow on the lawn, Gideon's haunted eyes, the wax. The note all pointed to a secret someone was desperate to keep or uncover. She resolved to visit the village archives tomorrow, seeking more on Gideon and this codex. But for now, she watched the library door, visible through the hall. Its dark wood seeming to pulse with secrets as the clock struck 9. A faint sound drifted from the library, a soft thud, like a book falling from a shelf. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her pulse steady but her resolve ironclad. Someone or something was moving in the stacks. She would not confront them tonight, not yet, but she would watch and listen and wait. The shadow had made its move, and Miss Marple, with her quiet cunning, was ready to make hers. Chapter 3. The Locked Room. Riddle. The morning mist clung to Blackthorn Manor's gardens, softening the edges of the yew trees as Miss Jane Marple stood by the library window, her eyes tracing the trampled grass she'd noticed the previous evening. The shadow she'd seen darting across the lawn lingered in her mind, a puzzle piece yet to fit. Her knitting bag, heavy with a hidden note, and her growing suspicions, rested at her side. The library, with its whispers and secrets, was no mere haunted relic. It was a stage, and someone was playing a dangerous game. Breakfast was interrupted by a piercing scream from the west wing, sharp enough to rattle the china. Miss Marple and Lady Beatrice hurried toward the sound, their footsteps echoing in the manor's cavernous halls. They found Clara, the young maid, trembling outside a heavy oak door in the library's annex, her apron twisted in her hands. "It's locked, ma'am," Clara stammered, her eyes wide with terror. "I was dusting the shelves, and I heard something inside, like a groan, low and awful. But that room's been sealed for years." Beatrice frowned, her composure fraying. "Sealed? I thought it was just unused." "Jane, this is the old reading room. My father had it locked after Gideon vanished. Said it was unsafe." Miss Marple's gaze settled on the door, its brass lock gleaming despite a patina of age. "Unsafe, you say? Let's see for ourselves. Do you have the key?" Beatrice shook her head. "It's lost, or so I thought. The housekeeper might know." Miss Finch, summoned hastily, produced a ring of keys, her hands unsteady. "This one might work, my lady," she said, selecting a tarnished key. "But no one's been in there since I started here." The key turned with a reluctant groan, and the door creaked open, revealing a small, windowless room. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by Miss Marple's flashlight. The space was cramped, its walls lined with empty shelves save for a single chair overturned in the center. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mold and something sharp and metallic, like old blood. Clara clutched Beatrice's arm. "I ain't going in, ma'am. Not after what I heard." Miss Marple stepped forward, her movements deliberate. Her beam swept the room, catching a series of deep scratches on the far wall, jagged and uneven, as if clawed by desperate hands. She knelt, her fingers brushing the floor, and found a small object half buried in the dust. A bookmark, its silk faded but stained with a dark, rusty smear. "Beatrice, look at this," Miss Marple said, holding up the bookmark. The stain was unmistakable blood, long dried but unmistakable. Beatrice gasped. "Blood. Jane, what is this place?" Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her mind racing. A room locked for decades, yet someone's been here. These scratches, this bookmark, they're recent, or at least not as old as Gideon's time. She examined the lock again, noting its pristine condition. And this lock, no rust, no wear. Someone's used it, and not long ago. She circled the room, her flashlight probing every corner. The scratches formed no pattern, but their depth suggested panic, not decoration. The chair, when righted, bore similar marks on its legs, as if it had been dragged or struck. But the most curious detail was the lack of dust on the inner side of the door, as if it had been opened regularly. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but firm. "This room was sealed from the inside. The lock's mechanism confirms it designed to be engaged only from within. Yet Clara heard a sound, and this bookmark suggests someone was here. There must be another way out." Beatrice's face paled. "Another way, but the walls are solid stone." Miss Marple tapped the floor with her foot, listening for a hollow sound, but the stone was unyielding. She turned her attention to the shelves, running her fingers along their edges. One panel, near the scratched wall, felt slightly loose. She pressed, and with a faint click, a section of the shelf slid aside, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Clara squeaked, stepping back. A secret passage. "Oh, ma'am, that's where the ghost lives." Miss Marple smiled. Faintly. "Not a ghost, Clara. A person, and one who knows this manor better than we do." She peered into the passage, her flashlight revealing damp stone steps spiraling downward. The air was cold, carrying a faint whiff of earth and decay. Beatrice clutched her arm. "Jane, you're not going down there." "Not yet," Miss Marple replied, closing the panel with care. "But we'll need to explore it soon. For now, let's secure this room and keep this discovery to ourselves." She pocketed the bookmark, its bloodstain a grim clue. The passage suggested a hidden network within the manor, perhaps linked to Gideon's disappearance or the forbidden collection. But who was using it now? The shadow from the lawn, the candlelit figure in the library, were they the same person, or part of a larger scheme? Back in the library's main hall, Miss Marple sketched a rough map of the annex, marking the locked room and the secret passage. She noted the room's proximity to the tall shelves where Tom had seen flickering lights. The pieces were connecting, but the picture remained incomplete. She needed more on Gideon, on the codex, on the manor's hidden corners at midday. She sat with Beatrice in the drawing room, poring over the ledger from the previous day. The mention of the Codex Nocturnus gnawed at her. "Beatrice, you," said Gideon, "secured the codex at great cost. Was it valuable?" Beatrice nodded. "Priceless, according to my father. A medieval manuscript filled with, well, occult nonsense, or so he thought. It was kept in a locked case, but after Gideon vanished, no one could find it." Miss Marple's fingers tapped her notebook. A missing book, a missing man, and now a hidden passage. Someone's gone to great lengths to keep something hidden or to find it. The afternoon brought a visit from the village constable, Mr. Harrow, a ruddy-faced man with a sceptical air. Beatrice had called him to report the blood-stained bookmark, though Miss Marple had urged discretion. Harrow examined the locked room, his boots scuffing the dust. "Likely just old paint, ma'am," he said, squinting at the bookmark. "This room's been shut tight for years. No one's been in or out." Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. "And the scratches, the passage?" Harrow shrugged. "Old houses have their quirks. Could be rats or settling beams. I'll file a report, but I reckon it's nothing." She let him leave without argument, noting his haste to dismiss the matter. Was he simply unimaginative or protecting someone? In St. Mary Mead, she'd known constables who turned a blind eye to local secrets, and Blackthorn felt no different. As evening fell, Miss Marple returned to the library, her flashlight steady. She avoided the locked room, focusing instead on the tall shelves near the back. The gap where a book was missing still intrigued her. She climbed a rolling ladder, her fingers brushing the spines, searching for another hidden panel. Near the top, she found a book slightly askew, slim volume on local folklore, its cover unremarkable. But when she pulled it, a soft click echoed, and a nearby shelf shifted, revealing another compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded and sealed with red wax. She broke the seal, her heart quickening. The paper bore a single sentence in the same elegant hand as the first note. "Seek the codex, but beware its keeper." No signature, no further clue, but the warning was clear. Miss Marple tucked the note into her bag, her mind alight with possibilities. The codex, the passage, the blood. The library was a web, and she was closing in on its center. She descended the ladder, her steps careful, and locked the library door behind her. The manor was quiet, but she sensed eyes watching, perhaps from the shadows beyond the lawn. Tonight she would stay awake, her door ajar, listening for footsteps or whispers. The locked room had yielded its secret, but others remained. Miss Marple was determined to find them, her quiet resolve as sharp as the scratches on the wall. The riddle was deepening, and she was ready to solve it. Chapter 4. The Vanishing Manuscript. The morning light filtered through Blackthorn Manor's tall windows, casting long shadows across the library's polished floors. Miss Jane Marple sat at a reading table, her knitting bag at her side. The two cryptic notes, "The forbidden collection must remain sealed and seek the codex, but beware its keeper," laid before her. Their elegant script hinted at a single author, but their purpose remained elusive. The blood-stained bookmark from the locked room, now tucked safely in her bag, added a grim edge to her thoughts. The library was no longer just a repository of books. It was a battlefield of secrets, and Miss Marple was determined to uncover its heart. Lady Beatrice joined her, her face etched with worry. "Jane, you look as if you've barely slept. Did you find anything new?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "A sleepless night is a small price for progress, Beatrice. I found another note last night, hidden behind a shelf. It mentions the codex again and a keeper. Someone is guarding something or hunting it." Beatrice's hands twisted together. "The Codex Nocturnus. I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it. There's something I didn't tell you yesterday. It's not just missing. It was stolen." Miss Marple's knitting needles paused. "Stolen? When?" "2 months ago," Beatrice admitted, her voice low. "It was kept in a locked case in the library's alcove, a steel safe built into the wall. One morning, the safe was open, the codex gone. No sign of forced entry. I didn't tell the staff, only Grayson and Miss Finch knew. I thought it was an inside job, but I had no proof." Miss Marple's mind raced, connecting the theft to the hidden passage in the locked room. A thief who knew the manor's secrets, she murmured, and likely used that passage to avoid detection. Beatrice, show me this safe. They moved to the library's reading alcove, a cozy nook with a high-backed chair and a small table. Behind a faded tapestry, Beatrice revealed a steel safe embedded in the stone wall, its door slightly ajar. The lock was intact, its mechanism intricate, requiring a combination rather than a key. No scratches, no damage, Miss Marple noted, running her fingers along the safe's edge. Whoever opened it knew the combination, who had access. Only me, Beatrice said, and Grayson for security. Miss Finch knew of the safe, but not the code. My father changed it after Gideon vanished to keep the codex secure. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Gideon again. His shadow looms large over this mystery. She examined the safe's interior, finding only a velvet lining and a faint smell of old paper. But as she tilted her flashlight, a glint caught her eye. Torn scrap of parchment, wedged in a corner. She eased it out with care, revealing a fragment of illuminated text, its edges jagged. The words, in Latin, were incomplete, but a single phrase stood out. Ritual tenebris, a ritual of darkness. Miss Marple translated softly, her Latin rusty but serviceable. The parchment's ornate border matched descriptions of the codex. Nocturnus gold leaf, intricate vines, a hint of menace in its design. Beatrice's breath caught. That's from the codex. But how did it end up here? Left behind, perhaps, Miss Marple said, or dropped in haste. Our thief wasn't as careful as they thought. She tucked the fragment into her bag, her mind buzzing. The codex's theft, the hidden passage. The notes all pointed to a deliberate plan, one tied to the manor's past and Gideon's fate. Determined to catch the thief, Miss Marple devised a plan. Beatrice, do you have another rare book, something valuable but less dangerous? Beatrice nodded. There's a first edition, Faust, kept in my study. Why? A decoy, Miss Marple said, her voice calm but resolute. We'll place it in the safe, announce its discovery to the staff, and watch who takes an interest. If the thief is still here, they'll be tempted. Beatrice hesitated. Jane, that's risky. What if they're dangerous? Risk is part of the game, Miss Marple replied, her smile disarming. But we'll be careful. Tell only Grayson and Miss Finch about the Faust. I'll handle the rest. By midday, the plan was set. Beatrice, with feigned excitement, informed Grayson and Miss Finch that a rare Faust had been found in a forgotten crate and placed in the safe for safekeeping. Miss Marple watched their reactions. Grayson's face remained impassive, but his fingers twitched. Miss Finch's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing quickly. The bait was laid. That afternoon, Miss Marple explored the library's upper levels, seeking more clues to the codex's whereabouts. The tall shelves, where Tom had seen flickering lights, were her focus. She climbed the spiral staircase, her flashlight sweeping the rows of leather-bound volumes. The air was cooler here, the shadows deeper. She paused at a section on medieval occultism, where Ars Arcana had been left open 2 nights before. As she scanned the titles, a faint creak came from below, near the alcove. She froze, listening. The sound was deliberate of footstep, cautious and slow. Slipping behind a shelf, she peered through a gap in the books. A figure, cloaked in a dark coat, stood by the safe, their back to her. They worked quickly, their hands gloved, probing the safe's lock with a small tool. Miss Marple's heart steadied. Not Graysont, too slight a build. Not Miss Finch, too tall. A new player, then, or an outsider. She considered calling out, but held back, noting the figure's careful movements. They opened the safe, revealing the decoy Faust, and hesitated, as if sensing a trap. Before Miss Marple could act, they closed the safe and slipped toward the library's rear door, vanishing into the corridor. She descended swiftly, checking the safe. The Faust was untouched, but a faint scratch marked the lock's edge, a sign of attempted tampering. The thief was cautious, testing the waters. Miss Marple's lips curved. They'd return, and she'd be ready. That evening, over dinner, she observed the staff with renewed scrutiny. Grayson served with his usual precision, but his eyes lingered on the library door. Miss Finch, clearing plates, avoided Miss Marple's gaze. Clara, still shaken from the locked room, whispered to the cook about cursed books. The manor buzzed with tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath. After dinner, Miss Marple sat with Beatrice in the drawing room, sharing her findings. "The thief was in the library today," she said, keeping her voice low. "They didn't take the Faust, but they'll try again. We need to watch the safe and the passage in the locked room. That's their way in." Beatrice's eyes widened. "You think they're using the passage, but who?" "Someone who knows the manor's secrets," Miss Marple said. "Perhaps someone connected to Gideon or the Codex itself. That torn-page ritual Tenebris suggests the Codex holds more than scholarly value. It's a key to something darker." Beatrice shivered. "Jane, this is madness. A ritual in my home, not madness." Miss Marple said gently, "Human greed, or fear, or both. We'll find the truth, Beatrice, but we must be patient." As the clock chimed 10, Miss Marple excused herself, claiming fatigue. Instead, she stationed herself in the library, hidden in the alcove's shadows, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Her flashlight was off, her senses alert. The safe, with its decoy, stood as bait. The passage, its entrance concealed, was her real target. Hours passed, the manor silent, save for the occasional creak. Then a faint scrape echoed from the locked room's direction. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, but she remained still. A soft glow flickered through the annex door candlelight. Not a flashlight, the same thief or another. She gripped her knitting bag, ready to move. The glow vanished, replaced by a soft thud, like a door closing. Miss Marple crept to the annex, her steps silent. The locked room's door was ajar, the passage panel slightly open. Someone had been here, and recently. She peered inside, finding nothing but darkness, but the air carried a new scent of tobacco. Sharp and fresh. She closed the panel, her mind alight. The thief was bold, using the passage despite her trap. But they'd left empty-handed, wary of the decoy. Miss Marple returned to her room, locking the door. The Codex's fragment, the notes, the passage all pointed to a deeper game. One tied to Gideon's fate and the manor's hidden truths. Tomorrow, she would trace the tobacco scent and revisit the village archives for more on the Codex. 4. Now, she sat by her window, the library's silhouette looming in the moonlight. The thief was close, but so was she. The trap was set, and Miss Marple, with her quiet cunning, would spring it. Chapter 5. Footsteps at midnight. The moon hung low over Blackthorn Manor, its pale light casting eerie patterns across the library's stained-glass windows. Miss Jane Marple sat in her room, her knitting idle, her mind sharp despite the late hour. The events of the Datha torn fragment of the Codex Nocturnus, the cloaked figure at the safe, the tobacco-scented air in the locked rooms. Passage wove a tightening web of intrigue. The thief was cautious, but their boldness betrayed them. Miss Marple was closing in, and tonight, she sensed, would bring another clue. She'd left the library's trapdoor to the passage slightly ajar, a subtle lure for the intruder. Her knitting bag, now a repository for the blood-stained bookmark, the 2 cryptic notes, and the codex fragment rested by her chair. The notes' warnings, the forbidden collection, must remain sealed and seek the codex. But beware, its keeper echoed in her thoughts. The Codex Nocturnus was the key, but to what? A ritual, a treasure, or something darker? At 11:30, a faint sound broke the manor's silencer, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps on wood. Miss Marple's pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady as she slipped on her shawl and took her flashlight. The sound came from the library's upper floor, the balcony where she'd found Ars Arcana open days before. She moved silently through the darkened corridors, her soft slippers muffling her steps, the flashlight off to avoid detection. The library door was unlocked, as she'd left it after checking the decoy Faust in the safe. She slipped inside, the air thick with the scent of old leather and wax. The footsteps grew clearer, pacing above, deliberate but uneven, as if the walker paused to listen. Miss Marple crept to the spiral staircase, her eyes adjusting to the dim glow filtering through. The windows, the balcony was shrouded in shadow, but a faint creak betrayed movement near the occult section. She climbed the stairs, each step measured, her hand grazing the cold brass railing. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft rustle, like fabric brushing against a shelf. At the balcony's edge, she paused, peering into the darkness. A shape moved, a silhouette, tall and lean, bending over a table. No candle this time, but the glint of moonlight caught a metallic object in their hand, a knife, perhaps, or a tool. Miss Marple held her breath, weighing her options. Confrontation was risky. Observation was wiser. She slipped behind a shelf, her small frame hidden by the towering books. The figure straightened, their head turning as if sensing a presence. They moved toward the staircase, their steps quickening, and descended with a grace that suggested familiarity with the library's layout. She followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. The figure paused at the library's rear door, the one leading to the corridor where she'd smelled tobacco the previous night. They slipped out, leaving the door slightly ajar. Miss Marple waited, counting to 10, then followed, her flashlight still off. The corridor was empty, but a faint draft carried the same sharp tobacco scent, now mingled with something sweeter, lavender, perhaps. The trail led to a service stairwell, rarely used by the staff. Miss Marple descended cautiously, her hand on the wall for balance. At the bottom, she found a narrow door leading to the manor cellar, its lock recently oiled. She hesitated, aware of the danger, but her curiosity was stronger. She pushed the door open, revealing a damp, stone-walled passage that stretched into darkness, likely connected to the secret passage from the locked room. A sudden gust of cold air made her pause. The footsteps were gone, but a new sound emerged, faint, rhythmic tapping like fingers drumming on wood. It came from deeper in the cellar, beyond her flashlight's reach. Miss Marple's heart steadied. She'd come too far to turn back. She stepped forward, her beam illuminating crates of wine and old furniture, their shapes looming like silent sentinels. The tapping stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. She reached a corner where the passage split, one path leading to the manor's foundations, the other to an iron grate set into the floor. Kneeling, she examined the grate, its bars rusted but recently disturbed, as if lifted. Beneath it, a faint glint caught her argikey, small and ornate, etched with swirling symbols that reminded her of the codex fragment's border. She retrieved the key with a handkerchief, careful not to touch it directly. Its weight was surprising, its metal cold and oddly smooth. The symbols were unfamiliar, not Latin or any script she recognized, but their intricacy suggested purpose cult, perhaps, or ceremonial. Miss Marple tucked the key into her bag, her mind racing. Was this the keeper's tool, or a relic of Gideon's efforts to secure the codex? Retracing her steps, she returned to the library, locking the cellar door behind her. The balcony was empty now, but the table where the figure had stood held a new Clue single page, torn from a book, left as if in haste. Its text, in faded ink, described a ritual involving a key of binding used to seal or unleash a great power. The page's edge matched the codex fragment, confirming its origin. Miss Marple's lips curved faintly. The thief was growing careless, leaving trails she could follow, but the key and the page raised new questions. Was the figure seeking the codex, or something it controlled? And why the library? Why now? Back in her room, she examined the key. Under lamplight, its symbols glowing faintly, as if etched with intent. She recalls Tom's story of Gideon's disappearance, the professor who'd visited, the codex's theft. The manor's staff, too, held secret scrasons, twitching. Hands, Miss Finch's nervous silence, Clara's fear. Someone was orchestrating this, and the footsteps suggested they were still active. Moving through the manor's hidden veins, she decided to confront Grayson in the morning, probing his late-night wanderings. The village archives, too, beckoned more. On Gideon and the codex might lie there. But for now, she needed rest, though sleep would be elusive. She locked her door, placing a chair against it, and hid the key in a folded shawl within her knitting bag as she settled into bed. A faint sound drifted through the manor, a single, deliberate footstep, echoing from the library's direction. Miss Marple's eyes opened, her mind alert. The thief was testing her, or perhaps unaware she was so close. She closed her eyes, not from fear, but from resolve. The key, the page, the footsteps, they were threads in her web, and she would weave them into truth. Tomorrow, she would tighten the net, starting with Grayson and the archives. The library's secrets were unraveling, and Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, was ready to pull the next thread. Chapter 6. The Librarian's Legacy. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor with a reluctant glow. The sky heavy with clouds that mirrored Miss Jane Marple's restless thoughts. The ornate key from the cellar grate, now hidden in her knitting bag. Alongside the blood-stained bookmark, cryptic notes, and codex fragment, felt like a talisman of secrets yet to be unlocked. The footsteps she'd heard at midnight, the torn page describing a key of binding, and the lingering scent of tobacco and lavender pointed to a thief who was both bold and elusive. Miss Marple's instincts, honed by years in St. Mary, Mead, told her the library's mystery was tied to Gideon. Blackthorn's disappearance and the Codex Nocturnus was its heart. Over breakfast, she sipped her tea, her eyes scanning the dining room. Lady Beatrice, pale but resolute, picked at her toast. Grayson, the butler, moved with his usual precision, but his glance lingered on Miss Marple a fraction too long. Clara, the maid, avoided the library door entirely, her hands trembling as she poured coffee. The manor's tension was palpable, a silent chorus of fear and secrets. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her voice light, "I'd like to visit the village archives today. Gideon's story intrigues me, and there may be records of his work or his visitors." Beatrice nodded. "I'll arrange for Tom to drive you. But, Jane, be careful. The village is full of gossip, and not all of it kind." Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Gossip is often truth in disguise, my dear. I'll manage." The village of Blackthorn was a cluster of stone cottages and narrow lanes, its heart a modest library that doubled as an archive. Miss Marple stepped inside, greeted by the musty scent of old paper and the quiet hum of a librarian sorting books. The archivist, Mr. Pembroke, was a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and a penchant for local law. His eyes lit up when Miss Marple mentioned Gideon Blackthorn. "Gideon, you say?" Pembroke said, adjusting his spectacles. "A curious figure, brilliant, but odd. Obsessed with the manor's library, especially its rare manuscripts. Some said he was chasing ghosts, figurative ones, mind you." Miss Marple leaned forward, her knitting needles clicking softly in her lap. "And what did he chase, Mr. Pembroke?" "Specific books, perhaps." Pembroke led her to a cluttered back room, where shelves groaned under the weight of ledgers and journals. He pulled a dusty volume labeled Blackthorn Manor Records, 1880 to 1885. "Gideon kept meticulous notes," he said, flipping to a page filled with tight, elegant script. "He was researching a secret society, the Order of the Saffron Veil. Old tales, mostly rumored to guard forbidden knowledge. Gideon thought their secrets were hidden in the Codex Nocturnus." Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "The Codex?" Again, did he mention its contents? Pembroke shook his head. "Only that it was dangerous. He wrote of texts that whisper to the soul, whatever that means. He stopped writing a week before he vanished." Last entry mentions a visitor, Dr. Elias Vane, a scholar from Oxford, came to study the Codex, but Gideon didn't trust him. "Elias Vane," Miss Marple repeated, filing the name away. And after Gideon's disappearance, Pembroke shrugged. The Codex was locked away, or so the family claimed. But rumors persisted. Village folk said Gideon found something in the library. Something that drove him to vanish. Or worse. Miss Marple thanked Pembroke, borrowing a slim journal of Gideon's she found tucked among the records. Its leather cover was worn, its pages filled with coded symbols and sketches of the library's layout. Back at the manor, she retreated to the drawing room, spreading the journal on a table. The codes were complex, a mix of ciphers and geometric patterns, but one page caught her Ajar map, crudely drawn, marking a chamber beneath the library's reading alcove. "Beatrice," she called, her voice steady but urgent. "Have you ever heard of a chamber under the library? A hidden room, perhaps?" Beatrice frowned, joining her. "Not that I recall. My father mentioned cellars, but nothing specific." "Why?" Miss Marple showed her the map, pointing to a circled area labeled Sanctum Arcanum. Gideon marked this itable. "It's below the alcove where the safe is. If the Codex was stolen, it might be the raw clues to its theft." Beatrice's eyes widened. "A hidden chamber. Jane, this is getting stranger by the day." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her mind racing. The chamber could explain the passage in the locked room, the footsteps, the thief's movements. But she needed to see it for herself. After lunch, she enlisted Tom, the groundskeeper, to help locate any access points. Armed with Gideon's map and her flashlight, They searched the library's reading alcove. The floor was solid oak, but Miss Marple noticed a faint seam near the safe, hidden by a rug. She knelt, her fingers tracing the wood, and found a slight give. With Tom's help, she lifted the rug, revealing a trapdoor, its edges flush with the floor. A rusty ring served as a handle, and with effort they pulled it open, exposing a stone staircase descending into darkness. "Blimey," Tom muttered. Peering down, never knew this was here. Miss Marple's flashlight illuminated damp steps, their edges worn smooth. "Stay here, Tom," she said. "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, fetch Beatrice." She descended, the air growing colder, heavier with the scent of earth and mildew. The staircase spiraled tightly, ending in a small chamber. Its walls carved with strange symbols, spirals, eyes, interlocking crescents. Shelves lined one wall, holding a few crumbling books, their titles illegible. A stone table stood at the center, etched with a single word, Nocturnus. Miss Marple's breath caught. This was no mere cellar, it was a vault, built to hide something. She examined the table, finding faint scratches, as if something heavy had been dragged across it. Her flashlight swept the floor, revealing a scattering of dirt and a single, fresh footprint, not hers, but larger, pressed into the damp earth. A sudden rumble shook the chamber, dust falling from the ceiling. The trapdoor above slammed shut, plunging her into near darkness. Miss Marple's heart steadied. She'd faced worse in St. Mary Mead. She climbed the steps, pushing against the trapdoor, but it wouldn't budge. A faint scraping sound came from above, as if something heavy had been placed on it. "Tom," she called, her voice calm but firm. No answer. She pounded on the trapdoor, her knuckles stinging, but the silence was absolute. Trapped, she returned to the chamber, her flashlight probing for another exit. A loose stone in the wall caught her eye, and with effort she pried it free, revealing a lever. She pulled it, and a section of the wall ground open, connecting to the passage from the locked room. Relief washed over her, but caution tempered it. Someone had sealed her in, knowing she was close to the truth. She emerged into the locked room, its scratched walls now sinister in the dim light. The manor was quiet, but the air felt charged, as if the library itself were watching. She found Tom in the alcove, rubbing his head, a bruise forming. "Someone hit me, ma'am," he groaned. "Came from behind. Didn't see him, miss." Marple helped him up, her mind racing. The chamber, the footprint, the attack on Tom to thief was desperate and close. She sent Tom to fetch Beatrice, then returned to her room, locking the door. The journal, the key, the codex fragment all pointed to the sanctum arcanum. But who was the keeper, and what were they guarding? As night fell, she sat by her window, Gideon's journal open. The codes were still a mystery, but the map was clear. The chamber was the heart of the library's secrets, and she would return, better prepared. The footsteps at midnight, the trapdoors slammed. They were warnings, but Miss Marple was undeterred. She would decode the journal, find the codex, and unmask the thief. The library's legacy was unraveling, and she was ready to face its shadows. Chapter 7. Descent into darkness. The air in Blackthorn Manor was thick with unease, as Miss Jane Marple sat in her room, the ornate key from the cellar grate glinting under her lamp. The events of the previous day, the hidden chamber beneath the library, the footprint, the trapdoor slamming shut, had sharpened her resolve. The Codex Nocturnus, Gideon Blackthorn's disappearance, and the shadowy figure stalking the manor were threads in a tightening web. Someone had tried to trap her in the sanctum arcanum, and that act of desperation only fueled her determination to unravel the library's secrets. Lady Beatrice joined her for breakfast, her face pale but resolute. "Jane, you could have been hurt or worse," she said, her voice trembling. "Tom's bruise is proof this isn't just about noises anymore. Whoever's behind this is dangerous." Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked softly, a calming rhythm. "Danger, Beatrice, often betrays the desperate. Someone knows I'm close to the truth. That chamber, the Codex Nocturnus, they're protecting something, or seeking it. We must explore that chamber properly today." Beatrice hesitated. "It's risky, Jane. What if they try again? Then we'll be prepared," Miss Marple replied, her smile steady. "I'll need your help, and Tom's, if he's willing. We'll go at midday, when the manor is quiet." After breakfast, Miss Marple examined Gideon's journal, its coded pages a puzzle she was determined to crack. The map to the Sanctum Arcanum was clear, but the symbols, spirals, crescents, and cryptic runes eluded her. One sketch, however, stood out, a circular diagram labeled Clavis Nocturnus, the key of the night. It matched the symbols on the key she'd found, suggesting it was more than a mere toolet, was a piece of the Codex's mystery. She tucked the journal and key into her knitting bag. Alongside the blood-stained bookmark, the 2 cryptic notes, and the torn Codex fragment. Each clue pointed to the chamber, but the attack on Tom and the trapdoor's closure hinted at a watcher within the manor. Grayson, with his guarded demeanor, remained a suspect. But the cloaked figure's slight build suggested another player. Agile, familiar with the manor's hidden passages. At noon, Miss Marple, Beatrice, and Tom gathered in the library's reading alcove. The trapdoor, now cleared of the heavy crate that had sealed it, stood open, its stone steps descending into shadow. Tom, his bruise fading, carried a crowbar, his eyes wary. "I ain't keen on going down there again, ma'am," he said, "but I'll watch your back." Miss Marple patted his arm. "Brave man, Tom. Stay by the trapdoor. If anything happens, call for help." With Beatrice at her side, Miss Marple descended, her flashlight cutting through the damp darkness. The air grew colder, the scent of earth and decay stronger. The Sanctum Arcanum was as she'd left it, stone walls carved with eerie symbols, crumbling books on sagging shelves, the stone table etched with Nocturnus, but now, in daylight's absence, the chamber felt alive, its shadows shifting as if whispering secrets. Beatrice clutched her arm. "Jane, this place feels wrong, like it's watching us." Miss Marple nodded, her senses alert. "Old places hold memories, Beatrice, but it's the living we must watch." She swept her flashlight across the shelves, noting the books. Titles: Umbris, Liber, Arcanum, texts on forbidden rituals, their pages brittle but intact. One shelf was empty, its dust disturbed, as if something had been recently removed. She approached the stone table, its scratches more pronounced in the focused light. Kneeling, she found a small object caught in a cracker glove, black leather, stained with dried blood. Her heart quickened. The glove was modern, its stitching intact, unlike the ancient relics around it. Someone had been here, and not long ago. "Beatrice, look," she said, holding up the glove. "This isn't Gideon's, it's recent, like the footprint." Beatrice's eyes widened. Blood again. Jane, what's happening here? Before Miss Marple could answer, a low rumble shook the chamber, dust cascading from the ceiling. The trapdoor above slammed shut with a deafening thud, and a grinding sound followed, like stone scraping stone. Tom's shout echoed faintly, then fell silent. Miss Marple's pulse steadied. She'd anticipated this. "Stay calm," she told Beatrice, her voice firm. "There's another exit, the passage to the locked room. We'll find it." They moved to the wall where Miss Marple had found the lever before. It was still there, hidden behind the loose stone. She pulled it, but instead of opening, the wall shuddered, and a new section slid aside, revealing a different passage, narrower, its walls slick with moisture. The air carried a faint metallic tense, like blood or rust. "Jane, this isn't the same passage," Beatrice whispered, her voice tight. "No," Miss Marple said, her flashlight probing the darkness. "But it's where we need to go. Stay close." The passage twisted downward, its steps uneven, carved from raw stone. Miss Marple's flashlight caught glints of mica in the walls, and once a faint carving an eye within a spiral like those. In the chamber, the air grew colder, the silence oppressive. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a small alcove, its walls bare save for a single iron door, its surface etched with the same symbols as the key dot. Miss Marple tested the door, but it was locked. She retrieved the key from her bag, its weight reassuring. The symbols aligned perfectly with the lock's engravings. She inserted it, turning slowly. A soft click echoed, and the door swung inward, revealing a cramped room filled with wooden crates and a single oil lamp, unlit but smelling of recent use. The crates were unmarked, but one was open, its lid askew. Inside, Miss Marple found a bundle of papers, letters, maps, and a single page in Gideon's hand detailing the Codex Nocturnus. It read, "The Codex is no mere book, it is a gate. The key binds it, but blood unlocks it." Her breath caught. The blood-stained bookmark, the glove were they part of this ritual? Before she could read further, a sharp crack echoed from the passage behind them. Beatrice gasped, clutching Miss Marple's arm. "Someone's coming," she whispered. Miss Marple pocketed the page, her mind racing. "Back to the chamber," she said, pulling Beatrice toward the iron door. They retraced their steps, the passage seeming narrower, the air heavier. As they reached the Sanctum Arcanum, the trapdoor above was open again. Tom's silhouette visible, his crowbar raised. "Ma'am," he called. Someone pushed a crate over the door, but I got it open. "You all right?" "We're fine," Miss Marple said, climbing the steps with Beatrice. "But someone's watching us." "Tom, did you see anyone?" He shook his head. "Just heard footsteps, running toward the cellar. Too fast to catch." Miss Marple's lips pressed into a thin line. The thief was bold, but their desperation was showing. The glove, the page, the keyall pointed to a ritual tied to the Codex, and someone willing to kill to protect or claim it. She secured the trapdoor, ensuring it couldn't be sealed again, and led Beatrice and Tom back to the library and the drawing room. She spread out her findings, the glove, the page, the key. "Beatrice," she said, "this chamber was Gideon's secret. He hid something there, perhaps the Codex itself, or clues to its location. The thief knows it, and they're trying to stop us." Beatrice's hands trembled. A gate, blood. "Jane, this is beyond theft." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but resolute. "But it's human hands behind this, not ghosts. Tomorrow, I'll decode more of Gideon's journal and trace that glove. For now, we lock the library and keep watch." As night fell, Miss Marple sat by her window, the key in her hand. The manor was silent, but she sensed movement in its shadows. The sanctum arcanum had yielded its secrets, but the thief was still. Out there, one step ahead. Miss Marple's resolve hardened. She would find them and the codex before blood unlocked more than a book. The descent was over, but the darkness was far from dispelled. Chapter 8. The Stranger's Warning. The morning after her harrowing descent into the Sanctum Arcanum, Miss Jane Marple sat in Blackthorn Manor's drawing room, her knitting bag a silent sentinel by her side. The blood-stained glove, the ornate key, the cryptic notes, the Codex Nocturnus fragment, and Gideon Blackthorn's coded journal weighed heavily on her mind. The page she'd found in the hidden alcove, with its chilling words, "The Codex is no mere book, it is a gate. The key binds it, but blood unlocks it," had deepened the mystery. Someone had tried to trap her in the chamber, and the fresh footprint and gloves suggested they were still active, desperate to protect or claim the Codex's power. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Clara, the maid, stood at the door, her face pale. "Miss Marple, ma'am, this was slipped under your door last night. Found it just now." She held out a folded note, its paper crisp and modern. Unlike the aged parchment of the library's clues, Miss Marple took it, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. "Thank you, Clara. Did you see anyone near my room?" Clara shook her head, her eyes darting to the floor. "No, ma'am. But I heard footsteps, light ones, after midnight. Thought it was the wind." Miss Marple dismissed her gently, unfolding. The note, the handwriting was sharp, hurried. "Leave Blackthorn Manor, Miss Marple. The Codex is not yours to find. Stay, and you risk more than your life." No signature, but the ink smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent she'd detected. In the library and cellar, Lady Beatrice, entering with a tray of tea, caught sight of the note. "Jane, what's that?" "Another clue, a warning," Miss Marple said, passing it to her. "Someone knows I'm close. This lavender scent, it's the same as last night's intruder. They're bold, but frightened." Beatrice's hands trembled as she read, "Leave. Jane, this is a threat. We should call the constable again." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. Constable Harrow was quick to dismiss the blood-stained bookmark. "I suspect he'd call this a prank. No, Beatrice, we'll handle this ourselves for now." Her mind raced, piecing together the clues. The lavender scent was a thread to follow, and the note's modern paper suggested someone outside the manor's staff, or someone clever enough to disguise their access. She resolved to trace the paper's source, suspecting it came from the village. Blackthorn's small size meant few places sold such fine stationery. After breakfast, Miss Marple walked to the village, her shawl drawn against the autumn chill. The high street was quiet, save for a few shopkeepers sweeping their stoops. She headed for the bookbinder's shop, a quaint storefront with a sign reading Pembroke and Sons, stationers. Mr. Pembroke, the archivist she'd met, also ran the shop, and his knowledge of paper made him her first stop. Inside, the air was warm, scented with glue and leather. Pembroke looked up from his workbench, his ink-stained fingers pausing. "Miss Marple, back so soon. More questions about Gideon." "Not today," she said, her smile disarming. She produced the warning note. "Careful not to touch the ink. Can you tell me about this paper? It's rather fine for a village like Blackthorn." Pembroke examined it, his brow furrowing. "This is vellum bond, imported from London. We stock it for special orders letters, invitations. Not many buy it, too costly. He hesitated, his fingers twitching. I sold a ream last week, but I shouldn't say. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Pembroke, someone left this note under my door, urging me to leave. If you know who bought this paper, it could prevent harm. Pembroke's eyes darted to the door, then back. A gentleman came in, a stranger, cloaked, paid in cash. Didn't give a name, but he had a city accent, polished. Asked for vellum bond, specifically. I thought it odd, but business is business. A cloaked stranger, Miss Marple repeated, her mind flashing to the figure at the safe. Tall, slight build. Did you notice anything else sent, perhaps? Pembroke frowned. Now you mention it, there was a whiff of lavender. Thought it was his cologne. He was in a hurry, didn't linger. Miss Marple thanked him, her suspicions deepening. A cloaked stranger, lavender-scented, buying paper for a warning note. The same figure who'd tampered with the safe, perhaps, or used the hidden passage. But why warn her now? Were they protecting the codex, or something more? Back at the manor, she shared her findings with Beatrice. The stranger is an outsider, likely, but with intimate knowledge of the manor. The lavender scent ties them to the library and the cellar. We need to watch for them tonight. Beatrice's face tightened. Jane, you're not suggesting we stay up again? After yesterday's trap? Precisely because of it, Miss Marple said, her knitting needles resuming their rhythm. They're rattled, making mistakes. That note was a misstep, it tells. Us, they're afraid. To prepare, Miss Marple examined Gideon's journal again, focusing on the clavis nocturnus sketch. The key symbols matched those in the chamber, but a new detail emerged, a reference to a veil of saffron, echoing Pembroke's mention of the Order of the Saffron Veil. The journal hinted at a ritual, one requiring the key and the codex performed in the Sanctum Arcanum. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. Was the stranger a remnant of this order, or a profiteer seeking its secrets? That afternoon, she inspected the library's rear door, where the cloaked figure had fled. The lock was modern, recently installed, suggesting someone had planned there. Entries. She found a faint smudge of lavender-scented wax on the handle, confirmation of the stranger's presence. She rigged a subtle trap, a thread tied across the doorframe, invisible in the dim light. If broken, it would signal an intruder. As dusk fell, Miss Marple and Beatrice dined quietly, the staff subdued. Grayson's eyes lingered on her knitting bag, and she noted his unease. Clara whispered to Miss Finch about ghostly steps, but Miss Finch shushed her sharply. The manor's tension was a living thing, coiled and ready to snap. After dinner, Miss Marple stationed herself in the library, hidden in the alcove's shadows, her flashlight off. Beatrice waited in the drawing room, ready to signal if anyone approached the rear door. The manor settled into silence, broken only by the clock's chime. At midnight, a soft snap echoed. The thread at the door had broken. Miss Marple's heart steadied. She crept toward the rear door, her steps silent. A faint glow moved through the stacks of lantern, its light dimmed. The cloaked figure emerged, their movements swift, heading for the locked room's passage. Miss Marple followed, keeping low, her eyes tracking the lantern's sway. The figure reached the annex, slipping through the passage's hidden panel. Miss Marple hesitated, then followed, her flashlight's beam narrow to avoid detection. The passage was damp, its air heavy with lavender and tobacco. Ahead, the figure paused, their lantern illuminating a stone wall. They pressed a hidden catch, revealing a small niche containing a single object, a brass compass, its needle spinning wildly. Before Miss Marple could act, the figure spun, their lantern catching her shadow. They bolted, dropping the compass, and vanished down a side passage. Miss Marple retrieved the compass, its engravings matching the key's symbols. She returned to the library, locking the passage behind her. The stranger had escaped, but the compass was a prize. Back in her room, she examined it, finding a tiny inscription to guide the seeker to the veil. The stranger was no mere thief. They were hunting something specific, guided by tools tied to the codex. Miss Marple's resolve hardened. Tomorrow she would confront Grayson about his unease and revisit Pembroke for more on the Order of the Saffron Veil. The stranger's warning had failed to deter her. Instead, it had lit the path. Forward, the library's shadows were parting, and Miss Marple was ready to step into the light. Chapter 9. Echoes of Betrayal. The morning sun barely pierced the fog enveloping Blackthorn Manor, casting a muted glow over the library's stained-glass windows. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting bag a quiet repository of clues, the blood-stained bookmark, the ornate key, the cryptic notes, the Codex Nocturnus fragment, Gideon's coded journal, the bloodied glove, and now the brass compass inscribed with "to guide the seeker to the veil." The stranger's warning note, scented with lavender, lay on the table. Its words: "Leave Blackthorn Manor, Miss Marple. The codex is not yours to find." A challenge she had no intention of heeding. Last night's encounter in the library's passage had revealed the stranger's desperation, but the compass suggested a deeper purpose, tied to the Order of the Saffron Veil and the Codex Nocturnus. Lady Beatrice joined her, her eyes shadowed with worry. "Jane, you were out there again last night, weren't you? That compass, what does it mean?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a steady counterpoint to her racing thoughts. "It means our stranger is no mere thief, Beatrice. There, guided, perhaps by the same obsession that consumed Gideon. The compass, the key, the codex, they're pieces of a ritual, and someone betrayed Gideon to claim them." Beatrice's hands twisted together. Betrayed? By whom? "That's what we must uncover," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but resolute. "The archives mentioned a Dr. Elias Vane, a scholar who visited Gideon before he vanished. I suspect he's the key to this betrayal. We need to learn more about him and his descendants." Determined to trace Vane, Miss Marple decided to revisit the village, but first she wanted to confront Grayson, whose unease had grown too pronounced to ignore. She found him in the pantry, polishing silver with a distracted air, his sharp eyes flicked to her knitting bag, then away. "Mr. Grayson," she began, her tone conversational, "you've been with the manor a long time. Did you ever hear of Dr. Elias Vane, a scholar who visited in Gideon's day?" Grayson's cloth paused, his knuckles whitening. "Vane? Can't say I recall, ma'am. Old stories, not my place to know." Miss Marple's smile was gentle but piercing. "Yet you seem troubled, especially when the library is mentioned. Last night, someone entered through the rear door. You were up late, weren't you?" Grayson's face tightened. "Checking the locks, ma'am, as always. The manor's old, full of creaks, nothing more." She let the silence linger, noting his clenched jaw. "Of course, but if you remember anything about Vane, do share. It might keep us all safer." Leaving Grayson to his polishing, Miss Marple felt certain he knew more than he admitted. His nervousness, coupled with Clara's report of his late-night library visits, marked him as a piece of the puzzle, though whether pawn or player, she wasn't sure. In the village, Miss Marple sought out Mrs. Lyle, a local historian known for her encyclopedic knowledge of Blackthorn's families. Her cottage was a clutter of books and faded photographs, the air thick with the scent of lavender tea. Mrs. Lyle, a sprightly woman in her 70s, welcomed Miss Marple with a knowing smile. "Gideon Blackthorne, eh?" Mrs. Lyle said, pouring tea, a sad tale. "Brilliant man, but too curious for his own good. The village still whispers about him and that codex of his." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes sharp, and Dr. Elias Vane. He was close to Gideon. "I understand." Mrs. Lyle's smile faded. Close, more like a vulture circling. Vane was an Oxford man, obsessed with rare manuscripts. Came to study the Codex Nocturnus, but Gideon didn't trust him. Found a letter once in the archives from Gideon to his brother. Said Vane was too eager to cross forbidden lines. Weeks later, Gideon was gone. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "A letter, do you have it?" Mrs. Lyle rummaged through a box, producing a yellowed envelope. The letter, in Gideon's elegant hand, was brief but damning. "Elias Vane covets the codex. His questions grow darker. His motives unclear. I fear he would betray me to possess it. If I must hide the truth, I will." The letter was dated 3 days before Gideon's disappearance, and Vane's family, Miss Marple asked, "Are they still in Blackthorn?" Mrs. Lyle nodded. "The Vanes live at Thornhill, a mile east. Ilias's grandson, Victor, runs the estate now. Quiet man, keeps to himself, but the family's always been odd. Rumors of strange gatherings, late-night visitors." Miss Marple thanked her, tucking the letter into her bag. Thornhill beckoned, but she needed to tread carefully. Vane's betrayal of Gideon, the Codex's theft. The stranger's warning all pointed to a legacy of greed and secrecy. That afternoon, she and Beatrice drove to Thornhill, a crumbling estate surrounded by overgrown hedges. The house was imposing, its windows dark, its air heavy with neglect. Victor Vane, a lean man in his 40s with sharp, familiar eyes, greeted them coolly. His study was lined with books, many on occult history, and a faint lavender scent lingered. "Lady Beatrice, Miss Marple," Victor said, his voice smooth but guarded. "To what do I owe the visit?" Miss Marple's smile was disarming. "We're researching the manor's history, Mr. Vane. Your grandfather, Elias, was a scholar of the Codex Nocturnus. Did he ever speak of Gideon Blackthorne?" Victor's eyes flickered, but his composure held. "Grandfather died before I was born. His papers mention Gideon, but only as a colleague. The Codex was their shared interest, nothing more." Beatrice shifted uncomfortably, yet it was stolen recently. "Any thoughts on who might want it?" Victor's fingers tapped his desk. "Old books attract collectors, thieves, too. I wouldn't know." Miss Marple noted his unease, the way his gaze darted to a locked cabinet. As they left, she lingered by a family portrait in the holler. Stern Elias Vane, his eyes hauntingly similar to Gideon's in the manor's photograph. The resemblance was uncanny, stirring a new thread in her mind. Back at the manor, Miss Marple retired to the library, her journal open. The letter confirmed Vane's betrayal, but Victor's guarded demeanor suggested the family's interest in the Codex persisted. As dusk fell, she heard a faint rustle outside the library window. Peering out, she caught a glimpse of a cloaked figure slipping into the woods, their silhouette matching the stranger from the passage. She hurried outside, her flashlight sweeping the trees, but the figure was gone. On the ground, however, she found a crumpled lavender sachet, its scent unmistakable. Returning to the manor, she overheard a heated argument from the servants' quarters. Grayson's voice, low and urgent, and another, unfamiliar, mentioning the family secret. Miss Marple's lips curved. The veins, the stranger, the codex, they were linked, and Grayson was entangled. She would watch him closer and visit Thornhill again. The echoes of betrayal were growing louder, and Miss Marple, with her quiet cunning, was ready to silence them. Chapter 10. The ritual unveiled. The fog clung to Blackthorn Manor like a shroud, muffling the morning's light as Miss Jane Marple sat in the library, her knitting bag a silent guardian of clues. The blood-stained bookmark, the ornate key, the cryptic notes, the Codex Nocturnus fragment, Gideon's coded journal, the bloodied glove, the brass compass, and the letter implicating Elia's vein. The lavender-scented warning note and the crumpled sachet, found outside, deepened the mystery. Victor Vane's guarded demeanor at Thornhill, coupled with the overheard argument involving Grayson and a family secret, pointed to a conspiracy rooted in betrayal. The Codex Nocturnus was no mere book, it was a catalyst, and Miss Marple sensed its power was about to be unleashed. Lady Beatrice joined her, her face etched with unease. "Jane, that sachet you found lavender again. It's as if the stranger's taunting us." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the manor's tension. "Not taunting," Beatrice warning. "They're afraid, and fear makes people careless. The Codex is the key, and I believe it's tied to a ritual. We must decipher more of Gideon's journal to understand what we're facing." She opened the journal, focusing on the Clavus Nocturnus sketch and the coded passages. Hours of careful study revealed a partial translation. The Codex opens the veil, the key binds the gate, blood calls the shadow. The words chilled her, echoing the fragment's ritual tenebris and the letter's warning about blood unlocking. A gate. The Sanctum Arcanum was the likely stage, and the stranger's movements suggested they were preparing for something imminent. "Beatrice," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but urgent, "we need to return to the chamber tonight. If a ritual is planned, it will happen there, under cover of darkness." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Jane, after the trapdoor incident, it's too dangerous." "Danger is certain if we do nothing," Miss Marple replied. "We'll take precautions, Tom. We'll guard the trapdoor, and we'll arm ourselves with knowledge." That afternoon, she revisited the library's occult section, pulling books referenced in Gideon's journal. 1. The Mysteries Umbrerum described the Order of the Saffron Veil, a sect that believed the Codex Nocturnus could summon a shadow of power to grant wealth or dominion. The ritual required a key, a book, and a sacrifice, blood willingly given or taken. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The blood-stained glove and bookmark were no accidents. They were harbingers. As dusk fell, the manor grew quiet, the staff subdued. Grayson's absence at dinner was notable. Clara whispered he'd been called away to the village. Miss Marple's suspicions deepened. His connection to the family secret suggested ties to the Vanes. She rigged another trap at the library's rear door, a fine thread tied low to catch an intruder's step. At 11, she and Beatrice, with Tom at the trapdoor, descended into the Sanctum Arcanum. The chamber was unchanged, its symbols glowing faintly under her flashlight. The stone table, etched with Nocturnus, seemed to pulse with intent. Miss Marple placed the ornate key on it, testing its fit against the carved symbols, but nothing happened. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive. Then a low hum began, rising from the walls like a distant chant. Beatrice clutched her arm. "Jane, what's that?" Before Miss Marple could answer, the hum grew into a rhythmic cadence, words indistinct, but menacing, echoing from the passage to the locked room. She motioned for silence, her flashlight off, and pulled Beatrice behind a shelf. The chant grew louder, accompanied by footsteps, multiple deliberate. Approaching the chamber, a glow appeared at the passage's entrance, revealing 3 figures in saffron robes, their faces masked. One carried a candle, another a small book, possibly the codex itself. The third held a dagger, its blade glinting. They moved to the table, arranging items, a chalice, a vial of dark liquid, and the book. The chant intensified, the words now clear. Tenebris vocamus umbra aperi. Miss Marple. Heart steadied. "We call the darkness, open the shadow." The ritual was beginning. She whispered to Beatrice, "Stay here. If I don't return, get Tom and run." Creeping closer, she hid behind a crate, her eyes on the robed figures. The leader, taller than the others, opened the book, reading in a low, fervent voice. The text matched the codex fragment's style, confirming its identity. The dagger wielder raised the vial, pouring its contents blood by its sent into the chalice. The air shimmered, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter. Miss Marple acted. Stepping into the light, she called, "Stop this at once. The codex is not yours to wield." The figures froze, their masks turning toward her. The leader's voice, muffled but familiar, hissed, "You were warned, Miss Marple." Before she could respond, a power outage plunged the chamber into darkness. The candle snuffed out. The chant faltered, replaced by scuffling footsteps. Miss Marple's flashlight flicked on, catching the leader, grabbing the book, and fleeing toward the passage. The others followed, leaving the chalice and dagger behind. She pursued, Beatrice at her heels, but the passage was a maze, and the figures vanished. Emerging into the locked room, Miss Marple found the library silent, the rear door's thread broken. The stranger had escaped again, but they'd left evidence, the chalice, filled with blood, and the dagger, its handle engraved with a saffron veil. Tom met them, crowbar in hand. Heard shouting, "Ma'am, you all right?" "We're unharmed," Miss Marple said, her mind racing. But the ritual was interrupted. "They have the codex, but they need the key and we have it." Back in the drawing room, she examined the chalice and dagger. The blood was fresh, likely animal, but the dagger's engraving tied it to the order of the saffron veil. The leader's voice nagged at her familiar, yet distorted. Was it Victor Vane, or Grayson, or another? "Beatrice," she said, "we must secure the manor. Lock all doors, post Tom at the library. The ritual's incomplete, but they'll try again." Beatrice nodded, her face resolute. "What now, Jane?" "We rally the staff," Miss Marple said. "Someone among them knows more Grayson, perhaps. Tomorrow, we confront him and search. Thornhill, the codex is close, and so is the truth." As midnight chimed, Miss Marple sat by her window, the key in her hand. The ritual's chant echoed in her mind, a warning of power unleashed. The stranger had fled, but their fear was her weapon. The library's secrets were unraveling, and Miss Marple, with her quiet tenacity, was ready to face the shadow. Chapter 11. The Traitor within the morning after the interrupted ritual in the Sanctum Arcanum. Blackthorn Manor hummed with a tense silence, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting bag, a trove of clues. The blood-stained bookmark, the ornate key, the cryptic notes, the Codex Nocturnus fragment, Gideon's coded journal, the bloodied glove, the brass compass, Elias Vane's damning letter, and now the chalice and dagger left behind by the saffron-robed figures. The leader's muffled voice, familiar yet elusive, gnawed at her, as did the lavender-scented warning and the broken thread at the library's rear door. The Codex Nocturnus was in the hands of the Order of the Saffron Veil, but Miss Marple held the key, and with it, the power to stop them. Lady Beatrice entered, her face drawn but resolute. Jane, the staff are terrified. Clara's talking of curses, and Grayson's been missing since last night. What happened in that chamber? Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a steady anchor. A ritual, Beatrice, meant to unlock the Codex's power. They fled with the book, but I disrupted them. The key is our advantage they can't complete. Their work without it. And I believe the traitor is among us. Beatrice's eyes widened. Grayson. Possibly, Miss Marple said. His absence is telling, and his unease has grown. We need to find him now. She began with the staff, gathering them in the dining hall. Clara, Miss Finch, and Mrs. Hargreaves stood nervously, their eyes darting to the library door. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but commanding. Mr. Grayson was seen last night, near the library. If anyone knows where he is, speak now. The safety of this manor depends on it. Miss Finch shifted, her hands twisting. He left after dinner, ma'am. Said he had business in the village. Didn't come back. Clara's voice trembled. I saw him, ma'am, before he left. He was in the pantry, token to someone whispering. About the family and keeping it hidden. Sounded scared. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. The family, you say? Did you see who he spoke to? Clara shook her head. Too dark, ma'am, but they smelled of lavender, like that note you got. The lavender scent, again. Miss Marple dismissed the staff, her mind racing. Grayson's connection to the family secret and the Vanes was no coincidence. She needed to confront him, but first, she returned to the library to secure the Sanctum Arcanum. With Tom's help, she checked the trapdoor. Finding fresh scratches on its edge, someone had tried to force it open since last night in the chamber. The air was still heavy, the symbols on the walls dim but ominous. The chalice and dagger remained on the table, untouched. Miss Marple examined the dagger's saffron veil engraving, noting its similarity to the key's symbols. The journal's decoded passage, the key binds the gate. Blood calls, the shadow suggested. The ritual was incomplete without both. She pocketed the dagger, its weight a reminder of the stakes. Back in the drawing-room, she pored over Gideon's journal, cracking another cipher. The Order seeks the veil's power, but the Keeper must betray their own. The word betray echoed Elias Vane's letter and Grayson's whispered argument. Was Grayson the Keeper, or merely a pawn? Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion at the manor's entrance. Tom burst in, breathless. Ma'am, it's Grayson. He's back, but he's in a state. Says he needs to see you, urgent. Miss Marple found Grayson in the foyer, his face ashen, his coat torn. His eyes, usually sharp, were wild with fear. Miss Marple, he gasped, I didn't mean for this. I swear it. Calm yourself, Mr. Grayson, she said, guiding him to a chair. Tell me everything. Who were you speaking to last night? And what is this family secret? Grayson's hands shook, his voice low. I'm a vain, distant cousin to Victor. My mother was Elias's sister. The family's been after the codex for generations, believing it holds power, wealth, influence. Victor forced me to help, said he'd ruin me if I didn't. I stole the codex from the safe, used the passage to get it to him. Miss Marple's voice was steady, but her eyes pierced. And the ritual, the blood. Grayson's face crumpled. I didn't know about that, not at first. Victor's with the Order of the Saffron Veil. They meet in secret, planning to use the codex to summon something dark. They needed blood, but I refused to help with that. Last night I tried to warn you, slipped that note under your door. But Victor's men caught me, roughed me up. I ran, hid in the village till morning. Beatrice, listening, gasped. You betrayed us, Grayson. After all these years. I'm sorry, my lady, he whispered, tears in his eyes. I thought I could stop them, keep the codex safe. But Victor's mad, says the ritual will make the veins great again. He's got the book, but he needs that key you found. Miss Marple's hand rested on her bag, the key's weight reassuring. And where is Victor now? Thornhill, Grayson said. He's planning to try the ritual again tonight, in their cellar. They've got a chamber like the one here, built by Elias. Miss Marple's mind raced. Grayson's confession confirmed her suspicions. The veins, led by Victor, were the Order's remnants, driven by greed and obsession. The lavender-scented stranger was likely Victor or one of his men, using Grayson as their inside man. But the ritual's blood requirement chilled her whose blood, and how far would they go? Beatrice, she said, lock Grayson in his room for now. He's told us what he knows, but we can't trust him yet. Tom, guard the library's trapdoor. We're going to Thornhill tonight, before they try again. Beatrice nodded, her face resolute. What about the constable? No time, Miss Marple said. Victor's desperate, and desperate men act quickly. We'll confront him ourselves. As dusk fell, Miss Marple prepared, tucking the key and dagger into her bag. She left the chalice with Beatrice, instructing her to hide it. Grayson's confession had unmasked the traitor, but the ritual loomed. She overheard a faint hum from the library, like the chant from the Sanctum Arcanum, growing louder as night deepened. In her room, she studied the journal's final decoded page. The shadow demands loyalty. The keeper's betrayal seals the gate. Grayson's betrayal of Victor, by confessing, might have disrupted the ritual's balance. But Victor, with the codex, was still dangerous. Miss Marple's resolve hardened. She would face him at Thornhill, key in hand, and stop the ritual before blood was spilled again. The traitor was exposed, but the shadow was stirring, and Miss Marple was ready to meet it. Chapter 12. Confronting the abyss. The twilight over Blackthorn Manor was heavy with the promise of rain. The air charged with a tension that mirrored Miss Jane Marple's steely resolve. Grayson's confession had unmasked him as a vain, coerced by his cousin Victor to steal the Codex Nocturnus for the Order of the Saffron Veil. Her knitting bag, heavy with Clusie blood-stained bookmark, the ornate key, the cryptic notes, the codex fragment, Gideon's journal, the bloodied glove, the brass compass, Elias Bain's letter, and the ritual dagger felt like an arsenal. The chalice, now hidden by Beatrice, was safe, but the codex was in Victor's hands at Thornhill, where he planned to resume the ritual. Miss Marple knew she had to act tonight, before the shadow the Order sought to summon claimed more. Then blood Lady Beatrice met her in the drawing-room, her face pale but determined. "Jane, you're sure about confronting Victor at Thornhill? We could call Constable Harrow." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a steady counterpoint to her racing thoughts. Harrow dismissed the bookmark as paint Beatrice. He's either incompetent or complicit. Victor's desperate, and the ritual's incomplete without this key. She patted her bag, where the Clavis Nocturnus lay hidden. "We'll go to Thornhill, but we'll be cautious." Beatrice nodded, though her hands trembled. "Tom's guarding the library, and Grayson's locked in his room. What's the plan?" "We'll enter Thornhill quietly," Miss Marple said. "Victor's expecting Grayson, not us. We'll find his chamber and stop the ritual. Bring a flashlight and stay close." As night fell, they drove to Thornhill, the estate's silhouette looming through the fog. Its windows were dark, save for a faint glow from the basement. Miss Marple's heart steadied. Victor was there, as Grayson had said. They parked a distance away, approaching on foot through overgrown gardens, the air thick with lavender and damp earth. The cellar door was unlocked, its hinges recently oiled. Miss Marple's flashlight swept the narrow stairs, descending into a stone chamber, eerily similar to the Sanctum Arcanum. Symbols spiral's eyes, crescents carved the walls, glowing faintly under her beam. A stone altar stood at the center, surrounded by saffron-robed figures, their faces masked. Victor Vane, recognizable by his lean frame and sharp eyes, stood. At the altar, the Codex Nocturnus opened before him, a chalice filled with dark liquid sat beside a dagger identical to the one Miss Marple carried. The chant began, low and rhythmic, Tenebris Focamus, Umbra Apirli. The air shimmered, the symbols pulsing. Miss Marple whispered to Beatrice, "Stay back. If they see you, run." She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chant like a blade. "Victor Vane, stop this madness. The Codex's power is a lie, and you know it." The figures froze, their masks turning toward her. Victor's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. "Miss Marple, you're persistent. Grayson warned me you'd meddle. The Codex is ours, its power will restore the veins." Miss Marple held up the ornate key, its symbols catching the candlelight. "Without this, your ritual is nothing. Gideon hid it to stop your family's greed. Surrender the Codex, or I'll destroy the key." Victor laughed, but his eyes betrayed fear. "You don't understand its power. The shadow grants dominion wealth. Influence. Elias was too weak to claim it, but I'm not." Beatrice stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "You're a fool, Victor. This ritual demands blood, whose will you spill." Victor's gaze flicked to the chalice, his hand tightening on the dagger. A willing sacrifice, or an unwilling one? It matters not. He nodded to the robed figures, who moved toward Miss Marple, their own daggers drawn. She acted swiftly, tossing the key onto the altar, where it landed with a clatter. The figures hesitated, distracted. Miss Marple darted forward, seizing the Codex and slamming it shut. The chant faltered, the symbols dimming. Victor lunged, but Beatrice threw her flashlight, striking his shoulder. He stumbled, cursing, as Miss Marple kicked over the chalice, its blood spilling across the altar. The air shuddered, a low moan echoing from the walls. The robed figures froze, their masks slipping to reveal frightened faces, local men, coerced or bribed. Victor, enraged, grabbed the key, but Miss Marple swung the ritual dagger, slicing his sleeve. "Enough," she shouted. "Your shadow is a myth, Victor. Greed, not power, drives you. Victor's eyes blazed, but the moan grew louder, the chamber trembling. The figures fled, their courage broken. Victor hesitated, then bolted for a side passage, clutching the key and codex. Miss Marple pursued, Beatrice behind her, but the passage twisted into darkness, and Victor vanished. They emerged into Thornhill's garden, breathless but unharmed. The glow from the cellar was gone, the chant silenced. Miss Marple clutched the dagger, her mind racing. Victor had the codex and key, but the ritual was disrupted, its power broken for now. Back at the manor, they found Tom guarding the library, his crowbar ready. "Heard nothin', ma'am," he said. "All quiet." Miss Marple nodded, her resolve unshaken. "Victor's fled, but he's not finished. We've stopped the ritual, but the codex is still out there." In the drawing room, she examined the dagger, its saffron veil engraving a grim reminder. Beatrice, shaken, poured tea. "Jane, you were fearless. But what now?" "We wait," Miss Marple said. "Victor's desperate, and desperation breeds mistakes. We'll search Thornhill tomorrow, with the constable if needed. The codex's power is a lie, but its danger is real." As midnight chimed, Miss Marple sat by her window, the dagger in her hand. The ritual was stopped, but Victor's escape meant the game wasn't over. She'd dismantled his altar, broken his chant, but the abyss still loomed. With quiet cunning, Miss Marple was ready to face it one final time. Chapter 13. The final clue. A week had passed since the chaotic confrontation in Thornhill's cellar, and Blackthorn Manor had settled into an uneasy calm. Miss Jane Marple sat in the library's reading alcove, her knitting bag lighter but still heavy with secrets. The blood-stained bookmark, the cryptic notes, the Codex Nocturnus fragment, Gideon's coded journal, the bloodied glove, the brass compass, Elias Vane's letter, and the ritual dagger. The ornate key and the codex itself were with Victor Vane, who had vanished into the night, leaving the interrupted ritual in disarray. Miss Marple's disruption of the Order of the Saffron Veils ceremony had bought time, but the threat lingered, and she was determined to end it. Lady Beatrice joined her, her face less strained but still wary. "Jane, the village is buzzing. Victor's disappearance has everyone talking. Constable Harrow's searching Thornhill, but he's found nothing. Are you sure we're safe?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a steady rhythm against the morning's quiet. "Safe for now, Beatrice, but Victor's not finished. He has the codex and the key, but his ritual failed. He'll try again, unless we find him first. There's one clue left to follow." She pulled the ritual dagger from her bag, its saffron veil engraving glinting in the light. During her sleepless nights, she'd noticed a faint seam in its handle, barely visible. With careful pressure, she twisted it, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a tightly folded paper, its edges worn but intact. Unfolding it, she found a confession in Gideon Blackthorn's elegant hand. "I hid the true codex in the library's heart, behind the scholar's gaze. The order cannot have it. If I fall, let this guide the righteous." Beatrice's breath caught. Gideon's confession. "Jane, does this mean the codex Victor has is a fake?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Possibly, or a partial copy. Gideon was clever. He faked his disappearance to protect the codex. The scholar's gaze must be a clue to its hiding place. We need to search the library again," they began. In the main hall, where the stained glass windows depicted scholars in medieval robes. One window, high above the balcony, showed a figure with piercing eyes, a book in hand. Miss Marple climbed the spiral staircase, her flashlight sweeping the glass. The scholar's eyes, crafted from amber glass, seemed to follow her. She tapped the frame, finding a hollow spot behind the figure's head. "Beatrice, help me," she said, pointing. "There's something here." With Tom's ladder, they reached the window. Miss Marple pressed the amber eyes, and a soft click echoed. A panel slid open, revealing a small safe embedded in the wall, its lock matching the symbols on the key Victor had taken. Disappointment flickered, but Miss Marple's mind raced. Gideon's confession suggested the true codex was here. Not with Victor. She examined the safe, noting its pristine condition, unlike the manor's older fixtures. This was installed later, perhaps by Gideon himself, she said. But without the key, we'll need another way. Tom, watching from below, called up, "Ma'am, I can fetch my tools. Might pry it open." "Do it," Miss Marple said, her voice firm. While Tom retrieved his crowbar, she studied Gideon's journal. Decoding a final passage, "The scholar's gaze guards the truth, but only the pure of heart may claim it." The words were poetic, but she suspected a practical combination, perhaps, or a hidden mechanism. Tom returned, and with careful leverage, he forced the safe open. Inside was a leather-bound book, its cover embossed with the same vine-like patterns as the codex fragment. Miss Marple lifted it, her fingers trembling slightly. The Codex Nocturnus, pristine and complete, lay in her hands. Its pages were heavy, filled with Latin text and intricate illustrations of rituals, stars, and shadowy figures. A note tucked inside, in Gideon's hand, read, "I hid this to stop the order. Forgive my deception." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Jane, you found it. Then, what does Victor have?" "A decoy, likely," Miss Marple said. Gideon was thorough. He planted a false codex to mislead the Vanes. Victor's ritual failed because he had the wrong book. They returned to the drawing room, the codex locked in a strongbox Beatrice provided. Miss Marple handed it to her, her voice steady. "Keep this safe, Beatrice. It's no mere book, it's a magnet for greed." The Order believed it held power, but Gideon knew it was a curse. Beatrice clutched the strongbox. "What about Victor?" "He's still out there. He'll come for it," Miss Marple said. "But without the true codex, his plans are dust. We'll inform Harrow. Let him hunt Victor. Our task is done." That afternoon, Constable Harrow arrived, skeptical but attentive. Miss Marple showed him the codex and Gideon's confession, omitting the ritual's details to avoid panic. "Victor Vane stole a decoy," she said. "The real codex is here, safe. You'll find him if you search Thornhill thoroughly." Harrow nodded, chastened. "I'll do that, ma'am. Should have listened sooner." As he left, Miss Marple sat with Beatrice, the manor quiet at last. The library's shadows seemed lighter, its whispers stilled. She packed her knitting bag. The clues no longer needed. The blood, the key, the ritual, all were human follies, not supernatural horrors. Gideon's sacrifice had protected the codex, and Miss Marple had honored it. "Jane," Beatrice said, her voice soft, "you've saved us. How can I thank you?" Miss Marple smiled, her needles resuming their rhythm. "By keeping that book locked away, my dear. Some secrets are best left unread." As evening fell, she stood by the library window, gazing at the scholar's gaze in the stained glass. The final clue had been found, the codex secured, and the traitor exposed. Victor was a fugitive, his power broken. Miss Marple's work was done, but her mind lingered on the manor's quiet, ready for the next mystery to unravel. Chapter 14. The library at peace. The autumn sun broke through the clouds over Blackthorn Manor, casting a golden warmth across the library's stained-glass windows, where the scholar's gaze now seemed serene rather than watchful. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting bag lighter. Its contents, once a trove of clues, now reduced to her needles and a skein of blue wool. The Codex Nocturnus rested in a strong box under Lady Beatrice's care, secured after Miss Marple's discovery behind the scholar's gaze. Victor Vane, unmasked as the leader of the Order of the Saffron Veil, was a fugitive, his ritual thwarted, his decoy codex useless. The manor's shadows had lifted, and a fragile peace settled over Blackthorn. Beatrice joined her, carrying a tray of tea and scones, her face brighter than it had been in weeks. "Jane, the village is quiet at last. Constable Harrow's men found Victor's cloak and some papers at Thornhill, but he's vanished, likely fled the county. The Codex is safe, thanks to you." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a gentle rhythm in the morning's calm. "Not just me, Beatrice. Gideon's cunning protected the Codex long before I arrived. I merely followed his trail." Beatrice set the tray down, her eyes soft. "You're too modest. You faced a ritual, a traitor, and a madman, all with that calm smile. How do you do it?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Years in St. Mary Mead, my dear. Village life teaches you to see through fear and gossip to the human heart beneath. Victor's order sought power, but it was greed, not ghosts, that haunted this manor." They sipped tea, the fire crackling in the hearth. Miss Marple reflected on the case. The blood-stained bookmark, the cryptic notes, the ornate key, the codex fragment, Gideon's journal, the bloodied glove, the brass compass, Elias Vane's letter, the ritual dagger, and the lavender-scented warning. Each clue had pointed to human ambition. Elias Vane's betrayal of Gideon, Victor's obsession with the Codex, Grayson's coerced theft. The Sanctum Arcanum, with its ominous symbols, was no supernatural lair but a stage for human folly. Beatrice broke the silence. "What will become of the Codex? Should we destroy it?" Miss Marple shook her head. "Destruction invites curiosity, Beatrice. Keep it locked away, perhaps in a museum's vault, where scholars can study it without harm. Its power is a myth, but its history is real. Let it be a lesson, not a lure." Beatrice nodded, her resolve firm. "I'll arrange it. The library will be a place of knowledge again, not fear. I've hired a new librarian, a proper one, not a Vane to catalogue everything properly." Miss Marple smiled. "A wise choice. And Grayson released," Beatrice said. "He's confessed to the constable, but his part was small, driven by fear. He's leaving Blackthorn, starting anew elsewhere." The afternoon passed in quiet conversation, the manor's staff moving with newfound ease. Clara, no longer trembling, hummed as she dusted. Tom, his bruise faded, tended the gardens with a whistle. Miss Finch, the housekeeper, even smiled as she served lunch. The library's doors were open, its air lighter, as if Gideon's ghost reel or imagined had finally rested. Miss Marple walked through the library one last time, her fingers brushing the shelves where she'd found the hidden panel. The scholar's gaze. The Codex is safe. The stained-glass windows glowed, their scholars now guardians of peace. She paused at the reading alcove, where the trapdoor to the Sanctum Arcanum was now sealed, its secrets laid bare. "Beatrice," she said, as they stood by the manor's entrance, "you've a fine home here. Keep it bright, and let the shadows Stay in stories. Beatrice embraced her, her eyes misty. You've given us that chance, Jane. Will you visit again? Perhaps, Miss Marple said, her smile warm. But mysteries have a way of finding me, even in St. Mary Mead. Tom drove her to the station, the countryside rolling past in a blur of gold and green. As the train pulled away, Miss Marple gazed at Blackthorn's fading spire, her knitting, needles clicking softly. The codex was safe, the order broken, Victor a fugitive. The library's horror was no supernatural curse, but a tale of greed, betrayal, and redemption, human, all too human. She opened her notebook, sketching a final entry, Blackthorn Manor, solved. The heart sees what fear obscures. Closing it, she leaned back, her mind already drifting to the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead. The library was at peace, and Miss Marple, with her sharp eyes and quiet cunning, was ready for whatever mystery awaited next.